Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Over the many years of being a content creator and a filmmaker, I've dumped a ton of money and time into my gear and equipment, and as a consequence, it has grown to a respectable size. Despite this, my setup is almost entirely consisting of what would be considered starter or beginning equipment. So for today's video, I'm going to be breaking down my beginner filmmaking and content creating camera setup for you guys. And next week, I'm going to follow up with a part 2-esque video where I'll break down the rest of my super important equipment that I use to make these videos and any other projects that I work on. So let's get started. Action. Okay guys, before we get started, there's a few things that I should mention first. First of all, the way that I'll be breaking down every tool or device here is by specs, then by price, and then by the actual personal value that the item has brought to me in my experience. And secondly, as you guys probably expected, everything that I'll be going over today is going to be in the description below, so you can go ahead and check it out for yourself. Anyways, let's get started. First up, we have my camera, which is the Canon EOS Rebel T7. By the way, after I introduce each device or tool, I'm gonna start assembling it. So you gotta take off the image sensor cap and we'll go over the lens in a minute. The Rebel T7 is exactly what comes to mind when you say starter camera for professional photography. There are a ton of things I could talk about technically with this camera, but just for the sake of this video and for the purposes of this channel specifically, also because there's a lot of things to go over here today, I'll be going over this camera's video mode specs and the kit lens that it comes with that I actually have never upgraded. The T7 shoots up to 1080p Full HD at either 24 or 30 frames per second. It has a CMOS image sensor with a total of approximately 24 megapixels in an sRGB color space. As for its exposure control, the shutter range at either 24 or 30 frames per second is a minimum of 1/30th of a second and a maximum of 1/4000th of a second. As for the ISO, or this camera's image sensor light sensitivity, the range on its video mode is a minimum of 100 and a maximum of 6400. When I first bought this camera, it actually came in a kit that included all kinds of other goodies, such as camera grips and lens filters and many other things. I'm not going to be going over all that in this video, but the total price of that kit was $779. Yeah, this camera is a bit of an investment, but this camera has served me so well over the years, and I can guarantee you that you will more than get your value out of it. I know that I have. I sound so sponsored.
Canon, I know that I have less than 100 subs, but if you're down to sponsor me, I'm down to be sponsored. Just saying.
However, I do have a few issues with this camera. My first issue with this camera is that it actually doesn't have a microphone port, so whenever you want to capture audio with your footage, you're gonna need to have a second audio system. Another issue of mine, and this applies to all cameras, I just don't know why it's so specific with this in particular, but the noise becomes very apparent very quickly as you increase the camera's ISO. In some instances, I think I've even the noise has become very noticeable at around 400 ISO, which again, it's a limitation in all cameras. Different cameras handle it very differently. It's just depending on the quality of the camera's image light sensitivity. And it's more of a nitpicky thing for me. I'm sure it's actually not as big of a deal to most people. My last complaint about this camera is also very specific. This camera will automatically stop its recording at around the 11 to 12 minute mark. I suspect it's because the file reaches its maximum size. And again, this might be a normal thing in all cameras, but if I'm shooting a commentary thing, I actually have to set like a stopwatch and cut it off around the 10-minute mark, just to be safe and boot it back up again. But now with the camera body out of the way, let's actually talk about its kit lens that it comes with, the Canon EF 18 to 55 millimeter zoom lens. This lens has an aperture that opens up to an f-stop of 3.5. The lens also comes with some image stabilization and autofocusing. This lens and other lenses in the Canon EF series have moments where it can be kind of frustrating, but it's overall a good lens with a very flexible focal length range. For example, lenses in the Canon EF series don't tell you the actual focus distance when you have manual focus on, which, like I said, can be very frustrating, but overall, this is a very nice lens to start with. Next, we're moving on to the Viltrox DC 550 Lite field monitor. And guys, I got a lot to say with this one. Oh, this did. I actually forgot to charge the battery that it comes with, so I'm gonna plug it in for a minute before I actually demonstrate this monitor. The DC550 light can display up to 4K resolution at 30 Hertz through an HDMI connection. It's touchscreen. It comes with this like matte box sun hood to protect it from light. It can display color and lighting graphs. You can actually import 3D LUTs through an SD card. It has Rec 709 color calibration and much more. Now I know some of you guys who are a little bit more experienced with the equipment might comment down below saying, well, these are all the normal features of a field monitor. Well, for the price of only $138, this monitor has been more than a lifesaver. Two things I especially love about this monitor is that, first of all, it works really well with my previously discussed Rebel T7 DSLR camera. I mean, I'm sure it works well with most cameras, but the weight of it and everything, it just pairs well together. And secondly, this thing is powered externally through a Sony NPF 550 battery, so that you can actually hot swap batteries and have continuous use with this. Now, when I call this field monitor a lifesaver, I absolutely mean that. I mean, I can't even imagine myself even doing shoots anymore without using it. Let's say, for example, I have a shot that I want to manual focus with like a shallow depth of field, and I need to make sure that the focusing distance is correct, because again, my lens here doesn't actually tell me the focusing distance. I need a high resolution, detailed, bright display to actually show me and make sure that I am setting everything correctly. But that's about it for the field trucks. So let's move on to my gimbal. This is the Hohem iSteady MT2 gimbal. The iSteady MT2 gimbal is a somewhat newer addition to my equipment pool. I love every chance I get to use this gimbal, but it doesn't actually happen very often. I don't get a ton of use out of it because most of the time I'm recording these videos or using my camera, I'm talking to a tripod. The MT2 is an all-in-one compatible gimbal, and it works with pretty much any camera you can think of, so long as it's under 2.64 pounds and less than 5.3 inches wide and 7 inches in length, which is very generous of Hohem because 7 inches is a lot. In fact, it's too much. What's even more nicer about this gimbal is that the camera mounting plates, the cell phone one and the Swiss plate for my DSLR, are quick release. So you can quickly take your phone off the gimbal to make phone calls, play games, or do something less important or less useful, like switching out the batteries on your camera. You can shoot either in portrait or landscape. I'll actually start setting this up while I'm explaining. And you can also use a variety of different modes that the gimbal comes with, such as locking one or multiple variable axes. There's sport mode, POV mode, and an Inception mode, which is named after that really cool scene from Inception where the hallway is spinning. Where very relatedly, the gimbal spins. You have to be very precise to balance out the gimbal though. On the bottom of the handle of the gimbal itself, on the base, there is a female screw port, so you can put on many different attachments like the tripod that it comes with, for example. But you can also attach other things such as a microphone mount, a field monitor mount, an extra handle, or anything else that you might need with it. Let's go ahead and unlock the different axes now. And it's already balanced on every other front, and you can see there how this works. The MT2 also comes with this AI tracking camera and lights. And as the name suggests, this AI tracking camera has a tracking mode that will lock onto subjects by responding to their hand gestures. Hohem also has an app for other gimbals as well that allows for extra controls and options as well, such as gimbal keyframe positioning. So you can set it at like this position at one time and then click it on the app and it will move over to this position, which is really nice if you are by yourself, like I am for usually all the time in these videos. For the fat price of $330, this gimbal is super nice, but not super necessary. That is, of course, unless you're kind of a run and gun shooter, and you always need that stable footage. You're better off in most cases waiting for this thing to go on sale before you go ahead and add it to your setup. One kind of two issues I have with this gimbal is that firstly, the battery life on this is only a couple hours in my experience. This wouldn't be an issue if it were powered externally, kind of like the field monitor is, but of course, this gimbal is charged in the base through a USB-C port. That's all I pretty much have to say about the gimbal. Let's move on to our last thing, which is the Amazon Basics tripod. It's very important to make sure that you properly put away all your equipment when you're done with it. Obviously, that makes sense, but you would hate to find out that something is either damaged or misplaced next time you go to use it. So anyways, let's talk about this Amazon Basics tripod. The Amazon Basics tripod here is pretty much compatible with all cameras, so long as they don't exceed the maximum weight cap of 6.6 pounds. With a high quality and high functioning quick release plate and head fluidity adjustment controls, this tripod is exactly what you want out of a starting tripod. It's extremely lightweight, sitting just over 2 pounds total. It comes with a bag and has 2 bubble leveling measurements and more. And for only $27, this tripod solidifies itself as a critical tool you're always going to use. At this point, I've had mine for many years and it still works great, but you know, it's just a tripod. Putting all the equipment that I just went over here together, you get a total of $1,274. And yeah, that is a pretty heavy price, but again, you don't have to start off having all of this. You can start off with your phone camera. You can start off with just a DSLR, but working your way up, this is pretty much a starting setup here, and you're able to produce some really high quality images. And let me be clear, like I just said, this isn't necessarily the equipment that you're going to right out the gate start with. I mean, phone cameras from 10 years ago look good, let alone the cameras on modern phones. As a matter of fact, I'm using my phone right now to record this as I put everything together. But anyways, let's wrap this up. But that about wraps up my breakdown of my camera equipment today. But like I said earlier, next week's video is going to be somewhat of a part 2 follow-up to this one, where I'll be breaking down the other important equipment in my arsenal as well, such as my shotgun condenser and my recorder. If you guys made it this far in the video, as usual, thank you so much. Every second that you guys give up to watch my content means everything to me. If you could do me one last favor though, and leave a like or drop a comment if you enjoyed this video, or even if you're new around here and you enjoyed this kind of content or all things film, subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again guys for watching, and I'm excited to see you guys next week. Until the next time, have a great week.